The wall clock showed exactly 3:40 in the afternoon when Victor entered the small social worker's office. The room was cosy, with pastel-coloured walls, some paintings of serene landscapes, and a large window that allowed the golden light of late afternoon to enter. A bookshelf filled with colourful children's books occupied a corner, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. Victor adjusted his navy blue tie for the third time in the last 5 minutes. At 38 years old, he never imagined he would be this nervous. His heart was beating as if he were running a marathon, and his hands, always steady in his work as an accountant, were now trembling slightly. He took a deep breath, looking at the cell phone where a photo of Nora, his wife, smiled on the screen. She should be here, he thought. But his niece's unexpected birth had taken her to another city that week. The decision to adopt had been made by both of them years ago, on a quiet Sunday after lunch with their relatives. "We can have biological children, Victor," Nora had said, holding his hands over the kitchen table. "But how many children out there need a home like ours?" That conversation echoed in him now. When they saw Mason at the shelter during a visit, it was as if a beacon had been lit. "This is our son," Nora had cried upon reading the boy's story. Mrs. Palmer, the middle-aged social worker with a gentle smile and experienced eyes, gestured for Victor to sit down. She arranged some papers on the light wooden desk, placing them into a blue folder. "Mason will be here in a few minutes," she informed in a calm voice. "He's finishing packing his things at the shelter." Victor nodded, feeling his mouth dry. They had visited Mason at the shelter several times over the past 6 months. He remembered how the boy, initially aloof, began to open up when Nora brought her chocolate cookies. How the three of them played soccer in the park and had many conversations about superheroes. But today was different. Today, if everything went well, they would bring Mason home. To the room they prepared together, to the family they chose to build. The door opened gently, and Victor turned to see Mason entering the room, followed by a shelter educator. The 9-year-old boy seemed even smaller in his faded green t-shirt and slightly oversized jeans. His white sneakers, though clean, showed signs of wear. His brown hair was unevenly cut, as if someone had rushed through it, and his large, deep brown eyes carried a weight that Victor recognized well. Mason carried a small blue backpack, clutching it tightly against his chest, as if it were his most precious possession. And it probably was. Inside were all his belongings. Some clothes, a small photo album, and a worn-out teddy bear that Victor found out had been his companion since he was 4 years old. "Hello, Mason," Victor smiled, standing up. "How are you feeling today?" The boy with his eyes down, fixed on the floor. "All right," he whispered, his voice almost inaudible. Ms. Palmer invited everyone to sit and began explaining the adoption contract papers. Victor listened attentively, but part of his mind was on the silent boy next to him. Mason had been through 2 foster homes before, all returning him to the system for reasons ranging from behavioral problems to family incompatibility. Each return had left an invisible scar on that small being. Victor and Nora knew this because they had carefully studied Mason's case before beginning the adoption process. They knew the boy had lost his mother to an overdose at the age of 5 and had never known his father. They knew he had trouble sleeping, sometimes had nightmares, and found it difficult to trust adults. How could he not? "And here, Mr. Victor, is where you sign to formalize the adoption." Mrs. Palmer pointed to a line at the end of the page, handing him a black pen. Victor took the pen, feeling its weight, his heart pounding, not from fear, but from anticipation. For so long he had dreamed of this moment together with his wife. He looked at the boy sitting in the chair beside him. Mason kept his eyes down, but Victor could see the slight tremble in his shoulders, the way his breathing was quickened. It was a mixture of fear and hope that was heart-wrenching. Victor remained by the boy's side, offering a sincere smile. But before he could say anything, the boy looked at him, eyes shining with unshed tears. "And what if I make a mistake again?" Mason murmured, his voice laden with insecurity. "Will you give up on me?" Those words were like a blade cutting deep. Victor felt his chest tighten, remembering his own adoptive brother, who had been welcomed by their family when he was the same age. David, who arrived distrustful, believing he would never be good enough to deserve love. Kneeling in front of the boy, Victor held his small hands, trying to convey the reassurance he himself needed to find. "We will never give up on you. You are our son now." The boy blinked, confused, as if he had never heard anything like that before. "But what if I'm difficult?" he insisted, almost in a whisper. "What if I disappoint you?" Victor took a deep breath, fighting against the emotion that threatened to overflow. He ran his thumb over the back of the boy's hand and said, "You know, I grew up with an adopted brother, David. When he arrived, he was afraid of making mistakes and being sent away. But my family never gave up on him. And do you know why? Because God teaches us that true love doesn't depend on getting things right. Love embraces us even when we fail, forgives us, and gives us another chance." Mason looked at him, absorbing every word, like someone desperately trying to believe. The truth is that Victor's dream had always been to adopt, and he found a wife who shared the same dream as him. Since he was young, he knew the impact this could have on a child's life, as he saw it happen in his own life. When David joined the family, he was just a broken boy, full of fears and insecurities, but upon receiving love and support, he flourished and found a new purpose. Victor never forgot the day he heard David say that he finally felt part of something bigger, finally loved. This experience shaped Victor's heart and planted in him the desire to offer the same chance to another child in need. Because he knew that God's love transforms and restores, and he wanted to be an instrument of that transformation in the life of someone who, like his brother, saw no hope. "You know, Mason," Victor continued, "when I was 10 years old and David came home, I didn't quite understand what adoption meant. My parents explained that it was like planting a new tree in our garden. It needed care, patience, and a lot of love to grow strong." A slight interest sparked in the boy's eyes. "Your brother, did he get well?" Mason asked. Victor smiled, recalling David's transformation over the years. "More than well. Today he is a doctor, helps many people, and has a wonderful family. But you know what he always says? That the most important thing that happened in his life was knowing that he had a place to call home, people who would never give up on him, no matter what happened." Mrs. Palmer watched the interaction with attentive and moved eyes. She had followed Mason's case from the beginning and knew how much that boy needed stability and unconditional love. "I have nightmares sometimes," Mason suddenly confessed, as if testing Victor's reaction. "And sometimes I get angry for no reason." Victor nodded, understanding. "We all have tough days, Mason. I do too. But it's on those days that we need each other the most." A comfortable silence settled between them. Mason seemed to be processing it all, weighing each word, evaluating if he could trust. "And if—" he started again, his voice even lower. "And if you have a real child one day, will you send me away?" Victor felt a pang in his chest as he realized how deeply the fear of rejection was rooted in that small heart. "Mason, look at me," Victor gently requested, waiting until the boy's eyes met his. "There will never be a real or not real child for me. Family is not a matter of blood, but of love. If one day Nora and I have other children, they will be your siblings, just as you will always be our son. Family is forever." Mason blinked several times, trying to absorb those words that contradicted everything his short and difficult life had taught him until then. At that moment, something seemed to be changing in the boy's eyes. A small light of hope began to shine where there had been only fear and distrust before. "Do you promise?" Mason asked, his voice choked with emotion. "Do you promise not to send me back?" Victor held his little hands more firmly. "Mason, I promise that you will be my son forever, on good days and on bad days, when you get good grades and when you need help at school, when you're happy and when you're sad, when you do things right and when you make mistakes, because that's what parents do, love unconditionally. The boy's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time he cried since he had arrived at the shelter. With a shy manner, he released the hem of his shirt and threw himself into Victor's arms, holding him tightly, as if afraid he might be snatched away at any moment. Victor hugged him tightly, smelling the cheap soap mixed with the sweat of a tiring day. The boy's voice came out muffled against his chest. "I just want a chance to be loved." Victor kissed the top of his head and whispered, "You are already loved, Mason, and you will have all the chances in the world because now we are a family." The social worker, who had been silent until then, discreetly wiped away a tear that was rolling down her face. Victor stood up and without hesitation signed the papers. It was the beginning of a new story, not just for the boy, but also for him. In the following weeks, Mason, Victor and Nora, who had quickly returned after helping her sister postpartum, learned to build their routine together. The room they prepared with such care, blue walls, a shelf with books and toys, a comfortable bed with a superhero quilt, became Mason's safe refuge. There were challenges, of course. In the first nights, Mason would wake up screaming from nightmares, and Victor or Nora would rush to calm him, taking turns staying by his side until he fell asleep. There were days when the boy tested limits, expecting to be rejected. When he accidentally broke a picture frame he hid in the closet, trembling. Victor found him curled up among the clothes, silently crying. "I'm sorry," the boy sobbed. "Please don't send me away." At that moment, Victor and Nora understood the depth of the emotional wounds that would need healing. He sat down on the floor next to the cupboard and began to talk about when he himself, at 8 years old, broke his mother's favorite vase and how she hugged him and said that people were more important than things. Gradually, Mason began to believe that he was truly at home. He started to leave his toys scattered without fear, to ask for help with homework, and to smile more often. In no time, the entire neighborhood knew the new resident of the Reynolds house, the boy with the contagious laughter who rode his bike alongside his father and mother. 6 months after the adoption, on a sunny Sunday, Victor and Nora organized a barbecue in the backyard. David came with his wife and children. The neighbors brought desserts. Mason's new friends from school ran across the lawn in endless games. Mason approached Victor, who was flipping burgers on the grill, and watched him in silence for a few moments. "What is it, champ?" Victor asked, noticing his son's contemplative look. "Do you think God planned this?" Mason suddenly asked. "That I would come to live with you?" Victor smiled, setting the spatula aside to give his son his full attention. "I believe so," he responded sincerely. "You know, sometimes God's plans are like a puzzle. At first we don't understand how the pieces will fit together, but he always knows the final picture." Mason thought for a moment, processing those words with the wisdom that only children who have faced hardships possess. "So all those families that returned me, maybe it was because I needed to find you," he suggested with surprising logic. Victor felt his eyes well up with tears. "Maybe, son. The important thing is that now we are together, and this is forever." Mason smiled and stepped in for a quick hug before running back to play with his cousins. Victor watched him, amazed at the transformation of that insecure and withdrawn boy into a child who was beginning to blossom, full of life and possibilities. On that day, Victor and Nora learned that adopting was not just rescuing a child, it was being transformed by the power of love that never gives up. They knew they would face challenges, that there would be difficult days, but they also knew that with the faith they had, they would be able to overcome any obstacle. Because God never gave up on them, and now he would never give up on that little boy. As he watched Mason running around the yard, Victor felt a deep certainty. Some of life's greatest blessings come disguised as challenges, and some of the strongest bonds are not formed by blood, but by the love that chooses to stay, even when it would be easier to give up. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.